Serious parents of Reddit, what was alleged reason why you didn't let your son-daughter have that friend over go to a sleepover? Kid was on serious medication for major behavioral issues. The kid's sibling was the favorite. Parents would dump said unwanted kid at our house without medication because it was good to take a break from antipsychotics. I say unwanted kid because he'd come over on an empty stomach and left for hours after the promised pickup time while they took the other kid out to eat and shop. They also didn't offer snacks, drinks, and eventually banned reciprocal visits. It sucks that the parents were shitty. Kid tried to commit suicide at one point and was institutionalized where, wonder of wonders, not taking a weekend break from medication left him much more stable. Edit to answer. This happened about 10 years ago. CPS got involved after the kid was institutionalized and things got better for him at least. The ban on reciprocal visits happened after there were some strong words about their parenting decisions. Having kids doesn't fix relationship problems. He was a complete asshole with no respect for adults. Breaking point was when he put bleach in a spray bottle and chased our 5-year-old around spraying him. His mother apologized but never again. She was a chronic liar. My daughter met her in kindergarten. She lied constantly about everything. One day my daughter asked us to help her put together a birthday card and make a homemade present for her friend's birthday, but when she brought the gifts to school, it turned out the girl had lied about what day her birthday was. I didn't want to put down my daughter's first good friend, but I refused to have them spend more time together than was necessary. I was relieved when she started ending every story about something her friend had said with "it's probably not true though." She outgrew that friend after a few months. Met the girl's parents later in the year. That poor kid never had a chance. Edit. I should have realized I left some next time on Dragon Ball Z type shiz at the end of my last comment. The parents were concerned with themselves. They were divorced and the mom was living with her new boyfriend. I got into a conversation with the mother during after-school pickup. Parents let the kids run around on the playground with friends, so there's some time to kill anyway. First half hour into our first encounter, she goes into several major scandals between her and her ex-husband and/or boyfriend, some of it pretty sexual in nature. One thing she always said was, "Can you believe he'd do X horrible thing to my daughter?" Regardless of whether the daughter had been involved. I got the vibe from them that their daughter was a pawn and that their home life was chaotic. The ex-husband had face tats, a record, and he asked an elementary school teacher if he could bring beer to field day. The field day thing happened much later, long after my daughter stopped hanging out with the other girl. Sometimes when I think my life is chaotic or messy, I think of them. Edit. Damn, you guys have some crazy stories. My parents went to drop off my stuff at a friend's house because I wanted to spend the night. They walked in, and my dad said, "Nope, you're coming home." She had 2 brothers, one was super nice, one was very touchy. Her dad then threatened my dad and said he can't take a child out of his home without his permission. My dad, being 6'3" and a large dude, got in his face. Her dad looked like a string bean and said he was taking me home right now. My dad told me later he had a really bad gut feeling something bad would have happened if I stayed. Her touchy brother is in jail now, for what I'm not even sure. I was a situation that set off my early warning senses. We were staying at the house of the daughter of my in-laws' friends. She had a 3-year-old son. My daughter was 5. They played well together, but I got some weird vibes that told me that my daughter shouldn't be crashing in the living room in a sleeping bag. I had her sleep with my wife in the guest bed while I slept on the couch. I kept a close watch on the kids the rest of the evening. The next day as we were leaving, the 3-year-old basically tackled my daughter. He was big, she was very small, and tried to mount and hump her on the floor. I extracted her and told him that wasn't appropriate. My daughter laughed it off as him trying to wrestle with her. Once in the car, I told my wife under no circumstances would our daughter ever be allowed back in that house, ever. She agreed. We later learned that the then boyfriend of the woman with the son used to let the boy watch hardcore porn with him. Mom found out when CPS got involved. The kid that wanted to come over has been over once before, and he shattered a window when he got mad, then ran to his house 3 blocks away. He was a little kleptomaniac. He came over exactly 3 times to hang out. Each time something would go missing, no more visits. Found out recently he was recently charged with embezzlement at the company he used to work for. He is destructive and has some unmedicated issues that affect his interaction with other kids. The kid doesn't play, he just upturns bins, throws things around and breaks stuff. My son is growing out of this kid. The kid is very sheltered and doesn't have the behavioral therapy that the doctors recommend, so he is just too much for my oldest and now my second to deal with. So that means the requests for him to come over are drying up. They really have nothing in common anymore. I had to hide ours box anytime he came over after he broke multiple games and couldn't understand why the shattered CD wouldn't work and why we were mad. I hated not letting the child sleep over, but that would have meant that my child would have wanted to sleep over at his house. His mother was living with a very abusive man who raised every single hair on my neck. This man taped off areas where my son's friend could walk and sit, ration food, etc. I was not about to let my son be in that environment. The friend started acting out from abuse. I had already talked to the school counselor about my suspicions, and CPS was involved. It was hard to explain to a child of 8 why this friend couldn't come over. I know the band kid. He would break shit, hide from you, hit the dogs, and he'd be rude and physically abusive to my grandmother. He'd pinch her for literally no reason, and probably little kid punched her a few times. He would scream for no reason, and no matter what you did for punishment, he'd ignore it. My mom physically threw him and all his toys out of our house one day after he hit a couple dogs and pinched my grandmother in quick succession, and he just stood outside and fake cried telling us to let him back in. We live in the middle of nowhere with no neighbors or traffic, he wasn't in any danger, and if he actually thought about it, he could have found his way back in. I think like an hour of peace went by and she finally let him back in. Stories from school include walking out of class and into another, and then beating a kid up, pulling a girl down by her ponytail and wailing on her, attempting to stab a kid with scissors, and being such a handful the teacher tried to get him moved to a special needs school. He was 5 when all of that was going on. He's 6 now and medicated with therapy and doing insanely better. His mom is moving cross-country with him to be with her family so they can help look after him. He was banned from a lot of school events and didn't have many friends, but that's turning around now. I no longer allowed my son's best friend to come to our place or for him to go over to his after the best friend's mom reported us to the police as harboring a runaway. This was after the best friend had been tossed out of his mom's house and told to spend the night sleeping outside, and she'd refused our phone calls to find out what was going on. So yes, I wasn't going to let a 16-year-old spend the night in 30-degree weather with nowhere to go, sue me. The cops showed up, said she'd reported us as harboring a runaway. We explained what was happening and got treated like dirt and told that from now on we had to have full permission from the mom. Fine. We urged my son's friend to go to the police, report to them what was happening, and left it at that. The mom tried to apologize 3 days later as being off her meds and say it was okay for my son to go to their house and vice versa, and I politely refused and hung up while she was screaming at me. I'd always been kind of uncomfortable with the woman and that just sealed it. They were still friends at school, but there were no more hanging out at either one's house, and I explained why, and they both agreed to the rules. The son is in the military now and doing quite well and no longer has contact with his mother. Gee, I wonder why. Came over to our house and ripped my daughter's brand new JoJo poster that she was so proud of to shreds. Mother did nothing. To make it worse, my daughter tried to tape it back together. My heart was breaking. The violence. THS kid just was violent to the bone. A kid tries to do anything with this kid, and a moment later they are either in a headlock or crying on the floor with bruises under their shirt. I found out a few months ago he got put into juvie. Don't think he's far from a prison sentence after he steps out. My daughter is not allowed to stay at A's house, and A can only come to ours during the day, but never overnight. We allowed her to stay the night there one time last year, and the stories that came back from a single night were completely unacceptable. Here are a few. The dad has a room that no one is allowed to go in, not even the mom. When he is going into it or coming out of it, he knocks on the door, and everyone has to look in the other direction. The windows of that room are even blocked out with black trash bags. As said, she has seen the inside of the room before, and there is just a couch, a TV and a Xbox One. I don't care. My daughter is never going to go there. The dad also apparently has lots of friends that visited all through the night. Most friends never actually came in the house. None of them knocked on the front door. The dad would either get a message or just know they were there and hang out with them for a little while by their back door. In the morning, before I picked my daughter up, her and A were outside playing with the dogs. My daughter is well-mannered, and when A's dad asked her if she had put her breakfast plate away, she answered yes, sir. Well, apparently, what he heard was yes, sergeant, and it royally pissed him off. He started screaming at A that her friends are disrespectful and that my daughter wasn't allowed back in his house. He then referred to himself in third person as sergeant for the rest of the day, and I am told it was until way after my daughter was gone. That told my daughter at school that it had all been straightened out and her dad felt bad about the misunderstanding and wants her to come stay the night again and will take them four-wheeler riding in the woods as an apology. 1. They don't have four-wheelers, so how is this even possible? 2. No fucking way is my daughter going out in the woods with this guy. If you are wondering, no, he did not let my daughter back in the house. I had to pack up her things for her, which her dad watched her do to make sure she wasn't taking anything of theirs. When I got there, they were sitting outside. I had no idea why, nor did I think anything of it till I got the previously mentioned story. Also, what was packed up for my daughter as her stuff was not all of her stuff, and we had to make a run to the store later for a toothbrush and her shampoo. She also didn't get any of her dirty clothes back, and A insisted at school that she couldn't find anything else of my daughter's at their house. HMMMMM. It would not fit in my daughter's clothes, nor would her mother, so my daughter's new size 0 jeans, small shirt, small exercise bra and panties somehow just vanished. The mom also did not speak the whole night. She just watched TV and would get up to get something for her husband or make him dinner, but she didn't speak to A or my daughter, and she also did not make them dinner. They had some popcorn and made their own breakfast in the morning. These girls were 16 at the time. I wish my daughter would have called me to say things were a bit odd. I would have come to get her sooner. Since this incident, we now have a code message because she said she didn't know what to say, even if she did call me. So now if something is amiss and she is uncomfortable, she is to call or message me asking when her next orthodontist appointment is. It lets me think of the reason she has to be picked up, and she does not have to feel awkward or in any way disrespectful. I have also told her it is perfectly acceptable to just say she wants to go home, but I also understand where that can escalate an already bad situation. She can't stay the night at our house because when A stayed at our house, her dad would call her randomly, even at 4 a.m. She missed the call once around 12:30 a.m. and immediately called him back. He was already in his car driving to our house to get her because she didn't answer, and I had to listen to a teenager talk her own dad out of a screaming rage. It was disgusting, and I am not going to have that around my daughter. I have not stated as much to my daughter, but I am perfectly happy that her and A do not hang out anymore. Edit. Thank you for the platinum. I didn't come up with the secret code idea myself, but it did emerge from having watched Meet the Fockers when they would say muskrat, and then my daughter and I coming up with something that would not sound obvious to anyone, but would be a clear sign to me. I have been told that Child Services does have an open and ongoing file about their household, at least as of March of this year. I wish I had known before this all happened, but I am just glad I know now, and that my daughter was open enough with me to tell me, and I pray that there isn't more that happened that she didn't. The father of one of my daughter's classmate, she was only in second grade, kept repeatedly telling my daughter to come spend the night over there. She told me about it, so I made sure to catch him one day, and he said in a very strange way, "Oh, she's welcome to spend the night anytime," and he wouldn't look at me. Plus the way he looked at her just creeped me out. Mind you, he's a single father, so there's no other adult in the house to monitor him. Early 90s, the kids on the street decided to have a camp out in someone's front yard. Little fire, ghost stories, s'mores, tents, the whole bit. Middle of the night, one of the kids starts screaming that someone is on him. Turns out another kid that just moved in had stripped down naked and smeared shit all over himself and attempted to do something to a sleeping kid. Parents all came out after hearing the screaming. Poop kid took a dump in the street and threw some at the parents of yet another kid. Again, it was the early 90s in the Midwest, so this display didn't go well. The parents went crazy. I never saw the Poop King again and his family moved away. My son started public school after going to Montessori school in 4th grade. I met another mom whose son started from private school the same year. My son was weird about befriending her son, and I wasn't sure why. Shortly into the friendship, the single mom started asking if her kid could sleep over every Friday. I was fine with that. Then it became school nights. Not so fond of that. Her son started showing up at 6:30 a.m. before school when we were all still sleeping. My son made other friends and just tolerated friendship with her kid. We explained that his home life wasn't great and he didn't have anyone most of the time. Halfway through the following school year, the kid brought a knife to school and pulled it on my son. The school did nothing, Baltimore, so I contacted her to let her know what happened. Her response was that he was such a goof. My son was rightfully avoiding him at this point, and the mom had the audacity to contact me and ask if we could watch her son for half a school week because she really wanted to go on spring break out of state with friends. She is in her late 30s getting a PhD in psychology. I had to tell her she and her kid were never going to be invited again. Pretty sure her dad was abusive and she picked up on that hostility. I didn't let my daughter go over and she doesn't come over here because, despite me feeling bad for the girl, she spent her time in school with my kid telling her to not listen to the teachers and to be disruptive. 9 years old, if that helps to understand. Kid has severe behavior issues and is super violent and destructive. The one and only time he came to our house, he threw all of my daughter's underwear around the room to embarrass her. The worst incident happened at school though, when he tried to choke her out. They were 5 years old at the time. I feel bad for the kid and all, and I know his mom is doing everything she can to help him, but I just can't allow that kind of behavior around my kids and in my home. Parents didn't lock up their firearms in a gun safe. My friend and her sister could sleep at our house, but my sister and I couldn't sleep at theirs. In college I figured it out, their house was a fire trap. Pathways between stuff like a hoarder's house, the bathtub was full of dirty water constantly, you had to move stuff just to use the toilet, the stairs to the basement, where we would have slept, covered in clothes, and only one way out of the basement, the windows were too small to crawl out of if you were larger than an average 2-year-old. Saw the inside of the house years later, and it was like a different house. They had a piano in the living room that I'd never seen before because it was just covered in hoarder crap. My daughter's best friend comes from a home where the parents are kind of a mess. Trying to explain to her why her friend can stay at our house, but she can't stay at their house without flat out saying her parents are constantly dealing with the police over domestic violence. Plus you'd come home smelling like an ashtray and get the equivalent health benefits of smoking a few packs of cigarettes. Is a real challenge. So, not a parent myself, but what my own parents dictated. Nearly every child in the neighborhood I lived in growing up was banned from coming over to our house, and our parents forbid us from going over to their houses. I didn't know it until years later, when I was 18 years old, and we'd long since moved from that place, but one of the kids in the neighborhood started a rumor that my older brother would try to molest the other kids, and also that our father beat us constantly. CPS was involved. Family counseling was involved. I remember vaguely having to go, and I remember an adult asking me questions while I played with toys, but I didn't really grasp what it was for. My dad didn't beat us. And my brother wasn't molesting anyone. The counselor apparently told my mother that if someone was molesting children, it was highly unlikely it was my brother. Since my mother wasn't totally sure who started the bullshit rumors, she just enacted a blanket ban across the board. My youngest son had a friend who was very perverted, to put it lightly, around my youngest daughter. He'd stop by during the day, and they, son and friend, would play video games in the basement, and the friend would make a dozen trips upstairs. I didn't mind or really take notice, beside just being odd he'd step away from a game so much. Then one day I'm walking down the hallway and he's in her bedroom smelling the sheets. I think, yep, you're done. Edit. A few details for the comments. The boy would have been around 13 to 14 and daughter 12. He didn't come back to the house for a long time, until after they graduated HS last year. He has a girlfriend and seems to have cooled it on the perv stuff, but I still kept my eye on him. My son and the boy had different interests in high school, so they kind of parted ways. When I saw what he was doing, I told him it's time to go home. I talked to his dad shortly after. He had his pants up. I talked to my daughter after that and a few years later, just to make sure. He had said a few things to her, but she insisted he never touched her. I didn't tell her why, the sheet incident. When I told my wife, who can be hot-tempered, she was in the car headed down there to kick some ass. She didn't care whose ass it was either. I calmed her down, and we decided to keep an eye out for a while. As a kid I had a group of girlfriends. One of them had a stepdad who was constantly volunteering to drive us places we wanted to go or suggesting outings etc. My mum never wanted to let me go, she thought it was weird that any adult would want to spend that much time with a bunch of preteen girls. Obviously not being allowed to go was so unfair. Turns out he'd been perving on her and abusing her for years, he ended up having to register as a sex offender. Edit to add. He didn't just want to drive us and drop us off, he would want to stay with us all day. Like if he suggested we all go swimming at the lake he'd sit there and watch while we swam etc. I guess I don't know how to describe it. His behavior was just very odd. If we were all over in the backyard he'd be constantly out there with us or just sitting watching us hang out. My daughter was 5 at the time. There was this kid, son of a co-worker. Co-worker was cool. My daughter got along with this kid on the playground. So we decided to do the playdate thing. The kid couldn't handle sharing his toys, so he started biting. Biting is basically the kid equivalent of whipping your dick out at a Chuck E. Cheese, which, ironically, is much less of a big deal if you do it while you are still a kid. So we were out of there. Coworker apologized profusely and asked if we could have a do-over at our place. Figured, not an issue because his toys weren't in play. Nah. Then he started biting because he wanted her toys. I was the banned kid. I smelled like cat piss and had fleas. Can't blame any of those parents tbh. Some tried helping by always giving me clothes to change into when I came over, washing mine, and feeding me but that always got too much for them eventually so to the banned list I went. It hurt a lot because I didn't understand as a kid. But now I wish I could apologize to them for bringing that mess around them. When I was in middle school my friend was a bit goth and tough looking. I was a good kid and my parents knew it. My mom didn't want me hanging out with my friend because she thought she would be a bad influence on me. I told my mom that wouldn't happen and that I would be a good influence on her. My mom said okay. My friend was not bad in any way, she just liked goth clothes, turned out she was a good student, and she lived in a mansion and was super nice. We went to Six Flags Fright Feast and she got me over my fear of throwing up on a roller coaster. Leslie, you were a really good friend and your dogs were super cute, I hope you are happy in life. Stopped my daughter staying at her friend's house when I found out the friend's mom was an alcoholic who was going out every night to the pub and bringing random guys home for sex. Happened every time she slept there and the mom didn't know the guys' names half the time. Completely disrespectful to our home. After multiple times telling them not to, my daughter is 6, she's 12. We live in the same complex, she'd constantly leave trash all outside, on our stairs, inside our couch, floor to where the baby can get makeup paint all over our carpets. She didn't care. Last and final sleepover, she invited a kid we didn't know to stay with her too. I felt bad because the girl was younger. Until it was 1 a.m. and they were blasting music, yelling, and dancing. We live on the second floor told them to go to bed, 7:30 a.m. same exact thing. She started coming over first thing in the morning, staying until late at night. I told her if she was hungry, she had to go home and eat and come back, 2 doors down. As we didn't have enough food to feed everyone, my husband has been out of work. And we're really struggling. She wouldn't. Whatever snacks we had for our 3 kids were gone in a day. Come to find out. She wasn't allowed at home while her mom was at work because her 24-year-old BF was at home. And she's getting boobs so she didn't need to be home alone with him. So much wrong with that statement, but true. Just last week the mom sent her to another state for a bit, my daughter misses her. But it's been nice not having my place full of kids, she'd bring friends all the time, all day every single day, and eating all the food we don't have. My mom had a solid rule that I use now and will always use. If your friend can't sit here, look me in the eyes and have a conversation with me, I don't like them. Obviously she could tell the difference from being shy versus being shady. Edit. Type the comment in a hurry and I'm also typing this edit in a hurry. Me saying shy was an acknowledgement to the socially anxious, something adults should be able to pick out fairly easy. This rule probably more aptly applied to us when we were say 10 or going into teenage years. Maybe saying look me in the face would have been better way to put it like another user said below. Dad is a chain smoker and smokes in the house. We'll have my daughter's friends stay over, but we'll find an excuse to have her take a shower early on, go to the park, swimming, etc. Our daughter can't stay there overnight, and even if she is there for a few hours, she showers and changes clothes as soon as she gets home. I did not encourage friendships with cruel children. The rule for sleepovers was they had to be independent at night, by which I mean, we're no longer coming to our room in the middle of the night for a bad dream or for cuddles or whatever, no midnight wandering. They needed to have a degree of emotional independence. Children I discouraged friendships with. A very spoiled and bad-mannered little rich boy, so indulged in a terror. No thanks. He wasn't bad, he was just badly behaved. Beyond little boy hijinks. A cruel boy, Lordy was not nice and it wasn't his fault, his mom was horrid. You could literally watch over the years how her combination of enabling bad behavior, excusing it, ignoring and then dismissing it just kept snowballing. It was like watching someone grow a bully. A very controlling and disruptive child, I noticed their behavior would influence my children's, and the oldest would be mean, mirroring his friend's behavior. My husband and I discussed it, and I talked it over with some friends for perspective, and then I had a talk with their mother and put the blame on my children. Not all children mesh well. My breaking point with that child was that he tossed our house and left for the I don't know seventh visit in a row after shrieking at my younger child that they were unwanted. Don't make my child feel unwanted in their own home. I'm not having it. I understand that younger children are not always wanted around older children, but there is a line, and they are allowed to exist in their own home. But that is only 3 out of many nice friendships. I never did this without a lot of thinking and soul-searching. Lice. So not me, but my dad. He grew up in Fort Worth, Texas in the 60s and 70s. This would have been late 60s, early 70s. He had this friend from school, Jack Davis, he refers to him as Jackie when he does talk about him. My dad and Jackie were good friends, but they didn't live in the same neighborhood, so they didn't see each other all day, every day. They probably met up and rode horses together. Jackie and my dad would have playdates, but almost always at my grandfather's house, never Jackie's. One night Jackie's mom and stepdad, Priscilla and Cullen, threw a big party and invited my grandfather. I'm sure basically the whole town was invites. My dad says his grandfather came back and said, "You are never to go back to that house. Do you understand me? Jackie can come here, but you can never go back over there." My dad says my grandfather never explained what happened or what he saw, but his word was law so he obeyed. In 1976, when Cullen and Priscilla were divorcing, somebody in a mask came into the Davis house, came downstairs, and shot Priscilla and her boyfriend Stan. When Priscilla's little girl heard the shots and came downstairs, she got shot too. Priscilla somehow lived and ran off the property to call police. Cullen was acquitted and then later acquitted of hiring a hitman to kill Priscilla and the divorce judge, even though the fucking FBI had mountains of evidence, because it was entrapment. Jackie died a few years ago, he had become homeless and died of exposure. My dad cried when he saw it on the news. Cullen is old as balls and still very much alive, we sometimes see him at the grocery store. My parents always refused to let me go over to that friend's house. She could come to our house, but I couldn't go over there. I always threw a fit about it in the moment. We grew apart over the years. As an adult, I had to interact with her family through my job in law enforcement. My parents never said why I couldn't go over there. They didn't want my kid mouth to tell everyone at school that Jane's parents were cocaine users dealers and that their live-in uncle was a registered sex offender. I learned the truth as an adult and respect my parents for being gentle and giving white lies regarding the situation. I'm sure my dumbest kid self would have bluntly mentioned it to Jane, and it would have hurt her. I'm sure she had it hard enough in that environment anyways. Not bad. And he could stay over. My brother was in the closet, but my parents knew and he wanted his friend to spend the night. My parents said yes, but they had to sleep in the living room. He then got pissed off and it didn't happen. A neighborhood 7 and 9-year-old asked my 5-year-old daughter to climb out a screenless window to go play and pet a cat. She escaped outside and did fine, but obviously I would have strongly preferred they ask permission first. We go for frequent walks and sometimes hear yelling and screaming coming from their house. While waiting for an ice cream truck, they were outside and said their parents fight and yell a lot, all while the parents were asking a 7 and 9-year-old to watch their 1.5-year-old brother while wandering the neighborhood. Yay, no. I'd like to know why one of my daughter's friends' parents won't let her spend the night. My daughter has slumber parties, beach trips, all sorts of fun with friends gatherings. I never got to experience that as a child, so if my girl asks for a sleepover or whatnot, the default answer is yes. However, if this one friend comes over, she has to be picked up no later than 11 p.m. I don't allow drugs in the house or any drinking during these events, underage or otherwise. Hell, the girl starts college next year. Isn't she old enough to go to a sleepover and watch Netflix, play video games? Daughter has asked her what the problem is, but she says parents have never let her stay over at anyone's house overnight. So when I was a kid, before contouring and highlighting and all the crazy makeup kids put on to just go to high school was around, my mom said I couldn't hang out with this girl Amy because she wore black eyeliner and only sluts wear black eyeliner. I rallied. Told her she can't judge a person based on eyeliner. I mean, that's fucking insane. After 28 years of best friendship, Amy started sending nudes to my dipshit husband. Mom was right. I should have listened to her back in 1990. In middle school, my mom banned me from hanging out with my childhood friend I'd known since kindergarten because her mom was crazy and abusive. As an adult, I wish she'd done it sooner because whenever I see anyone who remotely looks like my friend's mom, I freeze and refuse to move or do anything until they're gone. Luckily, this doesn't happen too often. After meeting him only once, I didn't get good vibes from my daughter's friend's dad. If he was in that house, there's absolutely no way my daughter was going to be allowed to be. As a parent, I never had to make this decision. My child and I had coded responses with each other. I knew from my own experience that these situations can be very tough, and your school friends sometimes try to pressure to do things you don't want to do, especially if they have their own agenda. Basically, if my child said, "May I go do this?" I knew she really wanted to and felt comfortable, so my answer was yes, unless we had family stuff to do. If she said, "Can I?" knew she felt uncomfortable or pressured into asking, so I would have her back and say no. I always trusted my child first and gave her the power to communicate, learn to trust her own gut and be confident. We made up codes between the two of us for her entire growing up. It worked so well during her teenage years. If she was uncomfortable at a party or situation, she would text me a certain phrase, and I knew she wanted me to call her with a reason to leave. We also never had curfews. Each event was different. We would talk about it and decide together what time she would be home. Now as a grown-up, she has thanked me a lot and said this was one of the best things I did for her growing up. She always felt like we were in it together. We were, and she is turning out to be an amazing person. This was a very rewarding part of being a parent. I remember my mother telling me when I was an adult that she didn't let me go to a friend's house when I had been a child because my friend's mother told me I could address her as mom. I had a friend from school who was a year younger, so I was like 10, he was 9, and I came over to his house and played some hockey outside. Then we got bored and we started tackling each other and rolling around on the grass. After that, we went inside and watched Hotel for Dogs. Well, the next day my friend comes over and says, "You can't come over anymore." I say, "Why not?" Then he said, "My mom thinks you're gay." Then basically the friendship died that day. I'm 10 and I'm not gay. Like WTF, his mom was a police officer too, she should have known we were playing. I love sleepovers and had nothing but positive experiences with them as a kid all through the 90s. My wife, however, did not. She had very bad experiences, and her mistrust of sleepovers only intensified when her nephew was found out to have molested all of his female cousins over the course of who knows how long. So she says our kids will never have sleepovers because she has only ever seen the bad side of them, and I can't really think of a valid argument to counteract that, nor do I really want to try at this point. That's some seriously bad stuff. I'm a son, not a parent yet, but my mom has always been sharp, and to know who I was friends with as a kid, I might not have believed my mom at the time to who my bad friends or rough crowd was at the time. But looking back at it, 9 times out of 10 my mom was usually right about them. Whether it was drugs, liars, or just outright not being a good friend to her son, my mom could always see through the bullshit in people. As a parent of a 1-year-old, this all scares the hell out of me. 10/10 shouldn't have read the comments.